You scroll past another headline about record heat, or a graph showing ice sheets shrinking, and for a second something tightens in your chest. Maybe you share it. Maybe you feel a flash of guilt about the flight you booked last month. Then the feed moves on, and so do you. Multiply that moment by billions of people and thousands of messages a year, and you get one of the biggest unanswered questions in modern communication. Does any of it actually work? Does a scary headline, a hopeful campaign, or a guilt trip from a friend change what people believe, what they support, or what they are willing to do? For decades, almost nobody tried to answer that question properly. Climate change is one of the most consequential problems humanity has ever faced, and fixing it depends on two very different kinds of change. Top-down change, meaning laws, regulation, and investment, and bottom-up change, meaning what ordinary people believe, vote for, and are willing to actually do. The bottom-up part is where behavioral science comes in, and that field has a much older starting point than most people assume. Right after World War II, a psychologist named Carl Hovland led a research program at Yale trying to figure out exactly what made propaganda and persuasion actually stick in people's minds. Hovland's team found something that still shapes advertising and public health campaigns today. Scaring people does not automatically make them act. Sometimes they just tune out or grow so anxious they freeze instead of moving. Researchers gave that second reaction a name, the boomerang effect. Climate communicators have been fighting over this exact tension for 20 years. When a certain documentary about an inconvenient truth hit theaters in 2006, its stark, almost apocalyptic tone became the template for how a lot of environmental messaging still looks today. Critics love the urgency. Other researchers worried it was quietly teaching people to feel powerless instead of motivated. That worry has a clinical name now too. Therapists increasingly treat something called eco-anxiety, a persistent dread about the future of the planet that, ironically, can make people withdraw rather than engage. So here is a question worth sitting with. Think about the last genuinely scary piece of climate news you saw. Did it actually change anything you did that week? Part of the problem, researchers have long argued, is something called psychological distance. Climate change tends to feel abstract, something happening far away, far in the future, to people who are not you. A drowning polar bear on a shrinking ice floe is a powerful image, but for someone sitting in a warm office in a landlocked city, it barely registers as real. So which of all these competing ideas actually works once you put them side by side? That is harder to answer than it sounds. Dozens of theories about persuasion exist, and almost everyone was tested in its own isolated study, with its own sample, its own outcome measure, its own country. Comparing them fairly was close to impossible, and even traditional meta-analyses hit the same wall, because the underlying studies never used the same methods twice. A few years ago, behavioral scientists started borrowing a fix from an unrelated corner of research. Economist Katie Milkman famously ran a megastudy on gym attendance, testing dozens of different nudges on tens of thousands of gym members at once, inside the very same experiment. The head-to-head format revealed clear winners that decades of smaller, separate studies had completely missed. There was a second, deeper problem too. Most behavioral science gets conducted on what researchers bluntly call weird populations, Western, educated, and from rich, industrialized, democratic countries. One widely cited estimate suggests over 60% of psychology research draws on samples from countries holding barely 11% of the world's population. For a genuinely global problem like climate change, that gap is not a minor footnote. The politics, the exposure to disasters, and the cultural meaning of environmental action vary enormously from one country to the next. A message that moves someone in one part of the world might do nothing, or even backfire somewhere else entirely. So a coalition of researchers decided to build something far bigger than a normal study. In late 2021, they put out an open call for collaborators on social media and academic mailing lists, inviting scientists anywhere in the world to help collect data, propose an intervention, or fund a local research team. The response was enormous. Behavioral scientists submitted 36 candidate interventions, each one rooted in a different theory about what actually changes minds. Through months of blind review and expert feedback, the team narrowed that list down to 11 finalists, each one representing a genuinely distinct psychological approach. The interventions ranged widely. One simply showed people a pie chart, revealing that 99% of climate scientists agree humans are causing warming. Another asked participants to picture themselves writing a letter to their own future self. A third framed protecting the environment as an act of national pride, patriotism rather than politics. Others leaned on real-world inspiration. One condition showed genuine examples of collective action that worked, including the international effort that healed the ozone layer back in 1987, proof that large-scale cooperation is not just theoretical. By the time recruitment finished, the team had reached 59,440 participants spread across 63 countries, from Algeria to Vietnam, each completing the survey translated into their own primary language. Every participant was randomly assigned to exactly one of the 11 interventions, or to a neutral control condition that just asked them to read a short, unrelated passage from a classic novel. After their assigned message, everyone answered questions measuring 4 completely different outcomes: how strongly they believed climate change was real and dangerous, how much they supported concrete climate policies, things like carbon taxes and clean energy investment, whether they were willing to share climate information with their own social network, and then a 4th outcome that had nothing to do with opinions at all: an actual behavior with a real cost attached. Participants were offered a strange little task. By completing a tedious, repetitive digital exercise, up to 8 times, they could each cause a real tree to be planted through an actual reforestation charity. No opinions involved, just effort traded for outcome. Exactly the kind of costly behavior that self-reported surveys almost never capture honestly. Here is the number that stops people in their tracks. Because of decisions made by these 59,440 participants, researchers actually planted 333,333 real trees. Once fully grown, those trees are projected to absorb nearly 10 million kilograms of carbon dioxide every single year, roughly the same climate footprint as powering 1,260 American homes for an entire year. That detail matters, because it means this was not a study about what people said they cared about. It was a study about what they were actually willing to do, measured in real trees, funded by real donations, planted in real soil. Before diving into which messages won, it helps to understand the baseline these researchers were working against. This was not a population that needed convincing that climate change was real. Across all 63 countries, average belief in climate change measured at 85.7%, an overwhelming global majority. That creates what researchers call a ceiling effect. When almost everyone already agrees with something, there is very little room left for any single message to move the number higher. It is one reason persuasion research on climate change looks so different from, say, persuading someone to try a brand new product they have never heard of. So if belief was already near its ceiling almost everywhere, the real fight was happening somewhere else, in what people were willing to support, share, and actually do about it. This is also where the study's design becomes powerful. Because participants were randomly assigned to their message, any difference between groups could be attributed to the message itself, not to who already agreed with it going in. That is the defining strength of a randomized experiment over an observational one, and it is what let the team talk about cause and effect, not just correlation. With that foundation in place, the results start to get genuinely surprising, and a little uncomfortable for anyone who has ever assumed the scariest message is automatically the most effective one. After testing 11 strategies on essentially a slice of the entire world, which one actually got people to do something that cost them real time and effort? Start with belief, the outcome closest to that already high ceiling. The single most effective strategy here was the psychological distance intervention, the one built around making climate change feel local and immediate instead of abstract and far away. It nudged belief up by 3 percentage points compared to the control group, the largest gain of any intervention tested, though clearly a modest one in absolute terms. Policy support told a different story. The top performer there was the letter to a future generation exercise, where participants wrote to an imaginary child living in the year 2055, describing what they were doing today to leave behind a livable planet. That single writing task increased support for real policies, carbon taxes, clean energy, protected land by 6 percentage points. What made that letter exercise unusual is who it worked on. Most interventions in this study only moved people who already leaned toward believing in climate change. The future generation letter was one of the few that worked almost as well among skeptics as it did among true believers, a rare case of a message crossing the ideological divide, instead of just preaching to people already convinced. So out of 11 completely different messages, which one actually got the most people to hit share? Exposing participants to blunt, frightening facts about the consequences of a warming planet was, by a wide margin, the single most effective way to get people willing to share that information with their own network, boosting sharing intent by 1 percentage points, the largest effect measured on any outcome in the entire study. For a moment, it looks like fear wins outright. It does not. That same fear-based messaging, the one that dominated sharing intent, was one of several interventions that actually reduced how many trees participants chose to earn through the effortful task. People who saw the scariest content were, if anything, slightly less likely to put in the work. The message that made someone want to forward a frightening post was not the same message that made them willing to spend real time doing something about it. And the tree planting results overall were the most sobering finding in the entire study. Across all 59,440 participants, not a single one of the 11 interventions outperformed the plain control condition. Several actually left people planting fewer trees than if they had received no persuasive message at all. The researchers have a partial explanation, rooted in something almost embarrassingly practical. Interventions that took longest to read or complete left participants with less patience for the demanding task right afterward. A simple trade-off between effort spent reading and effort left for actually acting. They note that other explanations, including a kind of quiet resignation triggered by bleak framing, remain possible too. Taken together, these four outcomes tell a story that no single theory of persuasion predicted on its own. The message that shifted beliefs was not the message that shifted policy support. The message that maximized sharing actively undercut costly action. And nothing tested reliably moved the one outcome that cost people something real. It is worth being honest about the limits here too. Every effect in this study, even the largest one, was small in absolute terms, and most of them worked mainly on people who were not climate skeptics to begin with. The study measured stated intentions and one symbolic task, not anyone's actual carbon footprint over months or years of daily choices. The researchers draw a fairly blunt conclusion from all of this. Individual messaging alone, no matter how cleverly designed, is unlikely to deliver the scale of change this problem needs. Most of that weight, they argue, probably has to fall on policy, regulation, and large-scale investment, rather than any single perfectly crafted message. None of that makes the bottom-up side pointless. It just means the honest answer to why has nobody solved this with one clever message is that no single message was ever going to be enough on its own. And now, there is real, global, randomized evidence to prove it. The study, Addressing Climate Change with Behavioral Science, a global intervention tournament in 63 countries, was led by Vlasceanu, Kimberly Doell and colleagues, and published in Science Advances in 2024.